Chapter 15 of Lord Latimer's Ladies, Checklist for Plan A. After completing 3 successful apologies in record time, Brian had been left to his own devices. He had gone back up to his room, where there was nothing for him to do. He didn't have much chance to become bored, however, for in a very short amount of time his valet appeared, smelling faintly of wood smoke, ready to help him into a different, equally attractive coat and a sturdy pair of shoes. "I wonder if you might enjoy an afternoon walk, my lord," Reginald Shield said. "I know you strolled along the shore this morning, but if you were to take a turn in the opposite direction, you would see that the countryside here offers some particularly fine views." "Fine," said Brian. "All right. I don't suppose there's a basketball court anywhere?" he asked. "No, my lord," said the valet, with such honest regret that Brian didn't even bother to joke with him about whether the castle got premium sports channels. "Walk it is, then," Brian said. He rubbed his hands together as if he were gleeful, and at least had the satisfaction of knowing his afternoon coat was every bit as swishy and dramatic as the morning coat had been. The countryside was definitely scenic, if one liked rolling hills, distant weeds, and a plethora of sheep. Brian was pretty sure they were sheep. He didn't find them fascinating at all, which was unfortunate. It meant nothing but a chilly breeze and the occasional woolly bleating to distract him from his impending deadline. Physically, he still felt fine, but oddly, this only added a sense of unreality to the whole back in time but gonna run out of insulin soon drama his life had become. He knew he ought to feel more of a sense of urgency than he did. Only, if his life were a TV show, as it almost seemed to be, he knew that he was one of the main characters, and main characters, in his experience, were pretty much guaranteed to come out on the winning side. Therefore, everything was bound to be resolved neatly. Of course, there would be a happy ending, but he suddenly realized he wasn't entirely certain what that would entail. "Home, Jeeves," he said, waving a hand in a grand manner towards a scraggly grove of trees. Yes, home, obviously, back to his own time, where insulin was available at any corner pharmacy. Alice was a main character as well. Of course she was. Was Lady Iris a main character too? Could there be 3 main characters? It had felt good to laugh with someone who actually got his jokes and was willing to play along, and it didn't hurt that she was exceptionally pretty in an imposing, regal sort of way. Yes, Lady Iris Patton. Saying all 3 names was apparently the way things were done in these days, was definitely more than a supporting player in this drama. Will the lovely Lady Iris Patton win a prize at the end of this dramatic episode? Or will it be one of the other 2? Brian intoned to the light and fluffy clouds of the sky, giving the sky his best announcer impersonation. "We'll be back to find out, right after these messages." His stomach growled in answer. He had skipped lunch to try and spare himself the insulin cost, but now he wondered if that had been the right decision. As the afternoon wore on and the path wound back towards the estate, he felt his hunger building, and along with it, the anxiety about whether the menu would be anything close to what he should eat. If not, how much of his dwindling supply of insulin would it take to counter the effects? A glance at his monitor was far from comforting. The numbers weren't all that alarming until you realized they represented a very literal lifetime supply of insulin. He came back to the house in a grim, worried frame of mind, and when he saw his sister emerge from the music room, he almost ran to meet her. "Alice, thank God, what have you found out?" "Brian." It was instantly clear that his sister and he were not in sync. Alice, practical, pragmatic Alice, nearly bubbled with good humor. "I was just hanging out with your girlfriends. You know, those ladies can all play musical instruments. And they're good. You should have heard what we did to Pick on the Boys. It rocked." In a sort of 1800s kind of way. She hummed a few bars, waving her fingers in the air as if playing an imaginary instrument. "Yeah, great," Brian interrupted, "but I thought you were going to do some figuring out about how this place worked. You know, tick-tock." He tapped a place beneath his waistcoat pocket where his insulin pump made an outline visible even against the layered fabric. Alice gave him an apologetic look. While he was dying, she hadn't had any right to goof around on the keyboard, cool as it might have been. "Yes, right, I did some of that too. Let's talk in here." For some reason, talking about life and death issues in a 19th century hallway seemed tacky or tasteless, whereas ducking through a creaking door into an elaborate drawing room with some obligatory billowing curtains seemed more in keeping with the castle aesthetic. They took seats in a strategically placed divan, a place clearly designed for conversation and small project. This was obviously a room for people with time on their hands. Some chairs, like the divan, had been set up specifically to make conversation easier, but there was a small table too, which implied that sometimes people might play a card game or try to make something, presumably while a fire crackled comfortably in the background. If one were truly reclusive or lacking hand-eye coordination, there was even a small collection of books on a shelf. Brian knew that the people in charge of entertainment had done their best, but he couldn't help but miss his TV. Holding the remote would have given him at least a semblance of control. He saw his sister looking around the room and wondered whether she was getting her thoughts in order or letting him wander. But to his relief, Alice snapped to. "Okay, Brian, this is definitely a weird place. On a hunch, I talked to your very efficient valet, Reginald. Mr. Shield is from a different time. He was dragged here just like us." "So, we're not the only ones?" asked Brian. "Yeah," said Alice. "He implied there might be even more. We're just the latest arrivals. From what I can tell, their story is just like ours. They wake up here and someone gives them a task to carry out, but the catch is, none of them have been able to do it, so they're stuck here. Some of them for years and years." "What kind of task?" "Simpler than ours," she said. "Find a book in the library. Stuff like that." Alice shrugged. "And they fail?" "As far as Reginald knows, no one has ever gotten home again. He talks about the castle as if it's a trap. I don't know, but it does feel like someone is stockpiling people here for something. Brian, who had never considered himself a collector's item, merely said, "Huh." "Creepy, right?" said Alice. "But looking around here, I wonder if maybe all that everyone needs is an extra set of eyes. I mean, if we could get the name of the book that Reginald is searching for, what if it had been here the whole time?" Brian began to feel more optimistic. Alice and he had always been able to work well together. Aside from writing songs for Alice's band, they were charades and Pictionary champs. All those years of being partners on family game night had given them a handle on how each other's minds work. "Another thing," Alice said. "Your valet, Reginald. That's his real name, by the way. Reginald. Got it." Brian seemed to imply a promise to get it right the next time. "Go on." Alice had heard that tone before, but decided that this was not the time to belabor the point. "He has a sort of battery storage contraption downstairs that he thinks is a way to power a time-traveling device if either of us happens to be smart enough to invent and build such a thing." "Batteries?" he said. "What do you mean?" "Leyden jars," Alice said triumphantly. "I knew I'd remember it eventually. He's got them hooked up to a lightning rod, just like your generic mad scientist might. Reginald seems to be the resident expert on the whole time travel deal, but I don't think even he knows whether our current arrival was intentional or just a big mistake. Do you mean this was a mix-up in the paperwork somewhere?" Brian asked, trying to find a logical thread in his sister's revelations. Alice frowned. "I'm getting the impression that this is not part of some master scheme by a brilliant mind bent on world conquest. This has been going on for years, and whatever crazy tactics the time-traveling powers that be are up to, they've never sent two people before. So maybe this means this master plan is getting closer to fruition, or maybe it means the system is breaking down. I feel like I'm close." Just then, a gust of wind caused the house to creak loudly while the candles flickered. "Wow, this is Twilight Zone creepy," said Brian after things settled down. "Okay, my turn. I met and apologized to all three of the ladies." Alice cringed. Brian saw this and hurried to reassure her. "No, really, I did. And I even did more than apologize. I told them we were all from the future. Lady Iris and the rich widow seemed to be sort of into it. Flower Girl was less impressed." "You told them we were from the future?" Alice asked. Brian nodded, and she chuckled. "I gotta admit, I might have mentioned our being from the future too, and the ladies are still here." "I'm not sure if they believed me," Brian admitted, "but it didn't seem to matter. Not as much as you might think." "To be honest, I don't think they believed me either," Alice said. "I suppose, if we have to, we can show them your insulin pump. That's the only piece of future tech we have with us, right?" "That's a great idea, Alice. You can't beat having a great prop. Why didn't I think of that?" Alice just looked at her brother. "Right. Focus, Brian. It's not about you all the time," he said, as if reciting a lesson he had learned phonetically. Alice continued with conviction. "I, for one, refuse to be one of those nitwits who run around in dramatic agony trying to cover up a secret. Seems like there's enough people who know about time travel that it's pointless to pretend it's not real. Whether they believe us or not, I don't think we have time to waste trying to convince them. Still, it doesn't hurt to have a good prop, Brian muttered as he waved his lace-encumbered wrist half-heartedly. Okay, Brian, you've got these 3 ladies in the proposal zone, and even if flower girl Eliza, she emphasized the lady's last name just a bit, isn't on board, there's still 2 more that might be willing to hear you out. You only need 1 yes, Brian. Right. Apologies done. I'm sure all 3 are in the running, but we still need a plan. Brian plowed ahead. Right, said Alice, and waited. Since Brian was the one with the ticking clock, it seemed to her that it would be polite to at least listen to what he had to say. There was a pause, then a longer pause. The fire in the fireplace snapped. Finally, Brian said, I got one. Great. Okay, it's not really complicated, he said. How about I go to the 3 ladies and say, Ladies, we are not from the future. See, I got a pump, and we want to go back. I need one of you to agree to marry me. One of them says yes, and then we're out of here. Ouch. Alice, for whom the ideal of romance was stronger both emotionally and intellectually, she struggled to say something positive. Okay, that's not complicated, Brian, but, well, it's not like we need a big case of love at first sight here, Brian hastened to explain. We just need a yes to get out of here. It's not like anyone has to mean it or anything. We get the go sign and then boom, zip zap whoosh, we're out of here. And everyone puts away the costumes and we're back home. No harm, no foul, tell the truth, break no hearts. Alice gave a shaky sigh. She took a deep breath. That's a pretty ballsy plan, Brian. Yes, but the way I see it, there are a couple of things in our favor. We have an ace in our hand. What's that? Us. It's you and me playing the game this time. They won't know what hit 'em. Worried as she was, Alice couldn't help but grin. Crazy 8 champs, 5 years running. Latimer family reunion. Alice felt her grin fade, but she was warming to the idea. And besides, we really don't seem to have any choice in the matter. Maybe we should propose to the ladies tonight, after dinner. At the mention of the word dinner, Brian's stomach growled and his anxiety surged back. He grew a little pale. These people eat lots, right? He asked. I mean, the ones at the top. The ones under, starved, I know. But these people ate like course after course? Oh yeah, especially at times like this, when you were trying to impress somebody. But Brian, try not to freak out. I don't think anyone's going to force food down your throat. Sure, she waved a hand airily. They dragged you to another century and got you a nice suit. Lots of them, actually. Brian displayed his latest outfit to his sister. What do you think of this one? Nice, Bri, said Alice absently. But as far as I know, nobody made you king of the Clean Plate Club. You don't have to eat everything on the table. I'm going to have to talk to the cook anyways, Brian said. I wonder if she has seen this coat before. I'll come with you, Alice said quickly. Brian laughed. To help show my coat to the cook? Trust me, said Alice, you'll need an interpreter. End of chapter 15, Lord Latimer's Ladies by Margaret Eland Schmidt and Dan McLaughlin. Read by Dan McLaughlin, 2024.